That was a really beautiful story that you told.
It touches me every time.
Did you think people are like that today in terms of celebrity? And
Listen, I don't want to just blanket everybody as being cold and callous, but I think it's a different celebrity today. I don't know that they have the same sympathetic, not they, I mean, some people, of course, do, but sympathetic and empathetic approach to their fans. I'll tell you the story of Joan Crawford. I went to a theater in New York at a play, and she was in the theater as an audience. And when she came out of the theater, her limousine was waiting for her. And I think about 300 or 400 people descended on her, and she stayed standing and signed autographs till every single person had the autograph. I don't know today. I mean, the paparazzi situation must be death to deal with all the time, and the intrusion on family, on their children, and what have you. I think that must be very, very hard. I don't know how they survive it, but yeah, it's a different time. You know.
Did you find yourself in the gossip columns or written about a lot?
No, a couple of times, who I was going with at the time, and was I, engaged to this one or that one or the other one. But, Sidney Skolsky and a few other people in those days were always very generous with mentions and lovely. But I never, got into any kind of scandalous situation. We didn't, we had in those days when I was under contract to Fox, things called moral clauses. And in the clause it said, you could do nothing to embarrass the studio. Boy, today that wouldn't last too long. But, we never did. We behaved ourselves. And we were happy to have a wonderful job and a wonderful studio to work for that was supportive. It's a different mindset.
When we left off, we were talking about that Twilight Zone stopover in a quiet town.
Yes.
You want to talk a little about the making of that episode?
Sure, I would love to. That was a unique episode. Mr. Rod Serling was quite a talented man, and he came to the set, and I can't remember the director's name was Oz. I can't remember. But anyway, it was one of the, it turns out, of course, it's one of the classics, Twilight Zone, just the two of us. And I remember the dress that I wore, this cocktail dress, very hot, very sexy dress. And speaking of hot, it was shot at the MGM back lot in those days. They used the back lot rather than go on location. And I had the, 5-inch heels or whatever they were in those days. And the story was kind of wonderful. I got a lot of people talk about that story. It must have really hit a nerve about how these two people wake up in bed together and they're all dressed and they don't understand why they got there and what house this is, and they go to the kitchen and there's fake food in the kitchen, and they go outside and it's fake grass, and they can't imagine how they got to where they got to, and they try to get out and they find a train and they get on the train goes around in a circle and comes right back to where they landed, or where they got on the train rather, and they go through these series of nightmare moments, only to discover at the last moment that this child reaches down and picks them up and says something to the effect of, stop playing with your toys that Daddy brought you from Earth and come to dinner or something. Well, Barry, God, what was the actor's name?
Barry Nelson?
Barry Nelson, yeah, bless his heart. Barry Nelson and I just had a great time, except that it was so bloody hot. It was so, so hot. And he was taking off the shirt and taking off the jacket every 5 seconds because he was fainting with the heat. And of course he'd say, you have nothing on. You have just a little cocktail dress, And I'd say, yeah, but I've got the 5-inch heels, So, but we had a good time. And we did those shows, I think, in a rather short amount of time. I mean, maybe 2 or 3 days. To get all that done, but it was a wonderful episode. We had a great deal of fun doing it.
Did you have a lot of interaction with Rod Serling on that one?
He didn't come to the set but once, and he was absolutely terrific. Afterwards, I did Requiem for a Heavyweight as a play, And I remember we asked him, I said, this would be a great play, Requiem for Heavyweight. And I said, hasn't been done? He says, I don't think it's been done. So apparently Wendell Corey, a great actor, and a guy who was a cowboy star, Clint Walker, played, the boxer. And the funny reviews were, I'm not terribly tall, I'm about 5'3", I guess, and Clint's about 7 feet. So our love scenes, unless we were sitting down, were sight gags. I mean, people would scream laughing at the fact that I just kind of barely make it to his waist. And so we had to restage a lot of it. But Rod Serling was a brilliant, brilliant man. And I was very proud to be in that episode.
You also did a series, The Long Hot Summer, around that time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that Long Hot Summer was my entrance into L.A. I finally left New York and came out to do this because it was a great piece, Faulkner. And my darling Eddie O'Brien, a wonderful actor, was the father, Big Daddy, and we had a couple of very interesting young actors in it. Lana Wood was in it, Natalie's sister, and Roy Thinnes, who was not too hard on the eyes, and wonderful directors. Bob Altman directed the pilot, and it was a terrific series. They made a big mistake, however, in not doing it in color. And it was the last show. I think they were kind of deciding whether to go black and white or color, and they made a bad decision with black and white, and we only did a season. Unfortunately, I think because of black and white, because we had great production values and a lot of wonderful location work. Done, back lot, most of it, but mansions and swimming pools and, a lot of good stuff.
What was the premise?
Well, it was based on the movie, based on the book, The Long Hot Summer. And then, Joanne and Paul did the movie, and it was the family of Will Varner and his daughter, from the South, and the bad guy, that wild boy that came in, invaded, and took Clara Varner away, and all that sort of good stuff. And it was great. It was great fun to do. I wore a lot of wonderful clothes.
And it lasted one season.
Yeah, I think we only got one season out of it. Eddie O'Brien became ill about 3 or 4 shows in, and he had to be hospitalized. So we were many shows without him. They were rewriting everything like crazy. And then they brought in Dan O'Herlihy to replace him. And I think the audiences, sort of got very much involved with Eddie O'Brien, and then to be kind of having to think, oh no, he's not everybody, it's, another actor. It loses the validity, somehow. So unfortunately it died. It should have stayed on. It was really good.
And you were continuously working. I'm going to give you just some names of some of the series that you appeared on during that time. Mm-hmm. Dr. Kildare.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Dr. Kildare was I'd like to see that show, as a matter of fact. It was about Glenda Farrell, I think, played my mother, who was a great old, not she's old, but she was a great movie star from the past. And she played my mother twice, actually, in 2 different shows. It was about the scandal of the funeral parlor business, which is what they were soaking the poor people for very expensive coffins and stuff like that. And it created quite a stir, actually. It was a lot of stuff written about it. It was a good show. And Chamberlain was fun to work with.
The Fugitive. You did a few of those.
Oh, I'm telling you, I had the best leading man. I'm just, oh, God, were they great. David Jansen and David had wicked sense of humor. So all I have to know is you have a wicked sense of humor, and it's called There's No Holds Barred. We're off and running. So I'm about to finish one of the shows I was doing over at the studio. And it's lunchtime. I think I have one more shot. And David says, come on, I'm going to buy you lunch. We'll go across the street to the restaurant. We'll leave the lot. We'll go across the street. I said, I never leave the lot when I'm working, David. It's a thing with me. I'm afraid if I get hit by a car and I won't get back to finish my job, you know. And he says, will you stop? You have one little scene at the end. Come on, I'm going to take you to lunch. And I said, oh, gee, this is against my principles. But all right, I'll go. So we go over and he says, what do you have to drink? I said, what? I said, I never touch drinking when I'm working. He says, say that, please. It's you don't know. And he says, oh, well, just calm down. Come on, have some vodka tonic or something like that. And I said, no, I'm not going to. He says, if you don't have a drink, I'm really going to be mad at you. This is a goodbye drink, and this is, lots of good luck, and I'll see you. We'll go out. And I knew a lot of people would come, and we'd see each other and socially and stuff like that. So I said, okay, I'll have, let's see, what'll I have? I'll have scotch and ginger ale. And he said, you're drinking and eating alone. I'm leaving. He said, nobody drinks that. That's a disgrace. He got up and left. He did, but laughed. I mean, it was his humor. And he came back. He says, don't drink that. No, you're not having anything. And he was great.
And you made it back to the studio?
Oh, yeah. I took 2 sips just to please him. But he was just a great guy. Great. I don't know that you know anybody in the whole world that says anything bad about this guy. He was just fabulous. Yeah, we had fun.
Another classic, The Outer Limits, Fun and Games.
Nick Adams, another great guy. You have to have a sense of humor on some of these things. We were running around the lot at MGM at 105 degrees of temperature, fighting off these 2 very badly dressed monsters and saving the planet. To try and do it in a straight face is really tough. That's acting. And they were the worst costumes I think I'd ever seen. I think moths were flying from them. It was just awful. And, of course, Nick was devilish humor, too. And, I had to say we've got to save the world. How am I going to live if we don't save the planet, And he's off camera doing his lines to me, and he's going, I said, I can't do that. You stop it. So it sounds like we weren't serious about our work, but we were. But I had great leading men. I really did.
Yeah, but how did you pull a role like that off? Because, again, it was pretty silly.
That's acting. That's years in the studio and still happen. No, you just have to believe it. You have to absolutely, totally believe that you're, doing something that's, you replace the monsters with the moth-eaten costumes with something that's more in your imagination as being important. So, because you can't look at them seriously without screaming. Luckily, I can't see too well, so when the glasses are off, I'm sort of ahead.
Can you talk about what you saw, what your process was to make those real?
To make the monsters real? Mm-hmm. I gave them disease. I gave them, a plague or something. AIDS wasn't very much in the news at that point in time. But I gave them they were bad diseases coming to, hurt everybody. It's the only way you could do it, otherwise you'd be on the floor.
Another genre that you appeared in is Westerns with Bonanza.
Right. Well, I was an expert horsewoman, and they didn't have too many of those coming out from New York. I started riding when I was a child, and so I rode a great deal in New York, at Central Park, and wherever I could find the stables. So when I got out here and they knew I could ride, I got a lot of jobs was riding in Long Hot Summer, too. And so I did a lot of riding.
Do you have any memories of working on Bonanza?
Just that the guys were great. Lorne Green was wonderful. He was starting the dog food company that he got involved with, and we talked about dogs and animals and things like that. They were all terrific guys, real hardworking, very hardworking. So it was a lot of work for them, and being outside and having to ride and all of that stuff. It was interesting. I think one of the scenes they had, which was on stage, and I had to ride in and they brought the horse on the stage. And they said, can you ride in at a gallop and, stop the horse before you, run over anybody or kill anybody with, a galloping horse on a stage? And I said, oh, no problem. So, they kind of didn't really believe me, so they had a lot of horse wranglers around to make sure that they could stop the horse. And I said, let me show you. So, I'm smarty. I got on the horse and stopped the horse. I went, my God, she's from New York. How can she ride? She's from New York. Impossible. Subways you get.
The Andy Griffith Show, A Girl for Goober.
Yeah. I was very fond of Andy Griffith. And the show was a huge hit. It was a big hit, that show. And I thought, this is not, normally the kind of show I'd be doing. But I thought, I want to do it. I just want to be on this show because I like it. I like what it says, and I like the fact that, he was a good guy. And a friend of mine was teaching his child, and I met the kid, and I'm going to do this. It's nice.
Do you remember any specific stories from shooting that episode?
Not really. Just that again, it was a nice experience.
Did you often do that? Did you request to be on certain shows?
I'd let my agent know. Yeah, I'd say if there's something coming up on, Andy Griffith's show or another kind of show, tell him I'd like to do one. So, you don't know where that information is going to go. I mean, it could be just thrown in a basket, but the agent did, and it just came up. That part came up. So, yeah.
Was it written for you?
Maybe a little bit. I think the part was there, but I think they probably tailored it a little bit.
You appeared on many Ironsides.
Yeah. Again, Raymond Burr was amazing. He wouldn't be there a lot of the time. And they had an actor who was his size and his bulk. He was a big, very strong guy. And you did most of your scenes with him, unless it was a two-shot, and then Raymond would leave. So you did a lot of acting with this very nice actor, and pretend, as I said before, not having the best vision in the world is a great help sometimes. Yeah.
In 1971, your career took a new direction with Tomorrow Entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
How did that come about? What was Tomorrow Entertainment, and what was your role in it?
I had done 2 series for ABC, and I knew the top brass pretty well with Doug Kramer and Tom Moore, and they were all, very devoted to Naked City, and they were also devoted to the hopes of Long Hot Summer being a hit. So Tom Moore would come to California from time to time to see the show, Long Hot Summer, check it out. And we sort of knew each other. So he said, would you like to have dinner one night? And I said, oh, I'd love to. So we went out to dinner, and he said, I'm thinking of forming a company called Tomorrow. Well, it didn't have a name at that point, but it was with GE backing. And he said, what do you suppose you're going to be doing when you're older? And I said, I never gave it a thought. So he said, well, you should. And he said, a lot of actresses sort of find themselves with nothing to do and wind up in a kind of serious situation. But, you ought to think about that. I said, I'm working all the time. Why can I be thinking of that? He said, you should think about it. So I was about to start a movie with Burt, The Man Who Loved Cat Dancing, Burt Reynolds. And I was about to start a play, The Child of the Cadenceville Nine. So I put that in the back burner. I said, I can't even deal with that. I don't even know what that's about. So I did my movie, And I started to do the play, which I did here in California, and went to New York with the play, and then came back, and we did it again here. In the meantime, Tom had called, and he said, "Did you ever give any more thought to what I had said?" And I said, "I can't tell you I did. I sort of let it sort of float by and didn't really pay too much attention to it." So he said, "Well, the company is I'm putting it together, and I've hired a few people, and I think you ought to think about coming over." So I said, "Well, let me think about that some more." So we got together again, and he said, I'm not going to pay you very much. And he said, "But you'll learn the business." And so I said, "Well, I'm doing the play." He said, when is the play finished?" And I told him. And he said, "Well, that's when you'll start." And that's when I started. And it was certainly the right choice. And he obviously had my great interest at his heart, because it was the beginning of an amazing transition. When I went into the office of Tomorrow Entertainment, I had a little room with no windows, but I insisted painting it blue because I wanted it very sweet and what have you, and a desk with scripts piled to the ceiling, in which I was supposed to write reports on every single one of them. I'd never done that. And he said, "And your job is to contact all the agents and get their latest scripts, and you will be an assistant to a man named Joe D'Augusta, who is going to be heading up my movie division." Okay. So in I went. I didn't know how to put a hold button on a telephone. I would go into the room where they had the Xerox machine and break them. I couldn't, not on purpose, but whatever I touched that was of a mechanical nature, it was destroyed. So the secretaries would ask me not to go in, and that they would do whatever I needed, because they spent more time calling the mechanics than anything else to fix these things. And so I sat in that room and I read, and I learned how to write synopsis and I learned how to read scripts, and I learned how to call agents who said, "What are you doing?" And I would say, "Well, I've started something new," and try to get them to be serious with me and send me material that was not around the corner 8 million times, that were new scripts. And as a matter of fact, I got a hold of George Lucas when he was doing American Graffiti, and I presented that script to the company and thought I was pretty smart about it. And they did not choose to make that script. They chose another script. Whereupon Tom Moore, years and years later, said, "Oh, I should have listened to you." He said, "Well, win some, lose some." And I stayed in that company for about 2 years, learning and supporting and helping.
Were there some other discoveries that you made from that script?
Oh, I got to know a lot of writers and agents. On that level, I never would have learned to have meetings with them about scripts. I never would have been able to accomplish that. There was a television department which was quite active. There were 2 producers named Bob Christensen and Rick Rosenberg, who were astoundingly gifted. They produced Queen of the Stardust Ballroom with Maureen Stapleton, and the big triumph at the company was the autobiography of Jane Pittman, which, we all were behind, we all supported. And, many, many, many movies of the week that were just fabulous, fabulous. So that was a tremendous experience. What my limitations were, I was not allowed to go to the network to pitch projects because they didn't think I was accomplished enough in executive capacity to do such a thing. And it was very frustrating because I'd find all these great things and I'd pass them on to various bosses, but then I wasn't able to follow through on anything else. That was the job. So after a while, I said, I just have to move on. I have to, now that I know what I'm doing, I have to move on. So there was a great writer named Carol Ledner. And I had had some dealings with her at Tomorrow Entertainment. And when I left Tomorrow Entertainment, I called her and I said, have you got some ideas? Have you got some thoughts? She said, well, yes, I have a great idea. There's a story of a woman gambler and how women are not, women are covert when they gamble. They're not as easy with it as men are. And she said, I know this particular woman who used to bet on how much her grocery bills would be. And she said, I think this is a story. I said, I think it is too. So let's work it out. So we worked out a synopsis. We took it to NBC. We hardly left the room when they said, call Business Affairs and make a deal. We want to make this movie. So I thought, well, please, it's that easy? That was lucky. And we had Shirley Jones play the woman gambler, who was a friend of mine, and she was brilliant, Larry Luckenbill. And because I had performed in Tree Grows in Brooklyn, I hired Joan Blundell to play a part, and Sylvia Sidney, who had played my mother on many television shows in the past. And they were both in it. And the picture was a huge hit. So I got a call from Fox, and they said, we'd like you to come over here and head up our development department.
Before we get to that, I want to ask a little bit more about
sure.
producing Winner Take All. You actually formed a production company
yes.
to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I brought that project to a company called Jozak. And Jozak was Jerry Abrams' son now, J.J. Abrams, who was a little kid running around, little brat kid. Jerry, his dad, and Jerry Eisenberg were the two guys that headed up Jozak Company. And I didn't have a company at that time, so I brought it to them, and they produced it. So they were the house that the project went to, with a wonderful guy named Bob Papazian, who was their in-house production manager. And Bob and I became extremely close, and he really showed me the ropes, and he was wonderful. We're friends to this day. And that's how that happened.
Well, how did Lilac Productions start?
Lilac Productions came about because when I finished doing my work at Fox, I'd produced a few more movies on the outside. And then Time Life had come to me after I produced a movie called Like Mom, Like Me, which was the highest rated movie CBS had seen. This was after I left Fox. And Time Life came and said, we want to get into business with you. And then I formed Lilac Productions with Time Life magazine. It's sort of a very strange circle, isn't it? I mean, here I am back with Time Life, so to speak, where I was on the cover many years back. So that's how Lilac came into.
How did you choose the name?
Well, need you ask? I have lilacs everywhere. They're my mother's favorite flower, and so I chose lilac.
Now, when you were with Tomorrow Entertainment, did you continue acting?
I finished up the 2 jobs that I had to do, and then I walked away.
Did you think it would be for good?
I thought it would be. I thought I would be. This was a new chapter. Yeah. And it's funny, I didn't know how I felt about it, except that I was not being paid anything. I mean, it was just ridiculous. But I thought, if this is the opportunity that's presented itself, I have to give it my 100% and see what happens.
Why do you think Tom Moore was wanted you in this position?
Because I'm brilliant, she said. No, because I think he saw in me a potential executive and a potential producer and director. He was the first one that said to me, did you ever think about directing? I said, there are no women directing things. What do you mean? And he said, well, you never know. You're young.
So that put the little bug in your head?
Yeah. Yeah. I hold him responsible now. I'm so sorry he's gone too. He died a few years ago. But he's the one who really saw in me the potential of becoming a producer and a director. It was his vision. And I took it for granted, to tell you the truth. I didn't think, well, big deal. No, I really took it for granted. And as the years went on, I appreciated more of his insight and his real care about what happened to me.
Now you'd start talking about moving to Fox.
Yes. So after Winner Take All, I got the call to come to 20th Century Fox to head up their development department of television.
Who called you?
A man named Cy Salkowitz. And Cy Salkowitz was then vice president. Yeah, Jack Haley was president. Cy Salkowitz was vice president of television. And Cy Salkowitz had written many episodes of Naked City. So the scuttlebutt on the street was that I was a pretty hot commodity with, having been at Tomorrow, having discovered this, that, and the other thing, and then producing a movie. And so they said, come on over. And plus, Cy loved me and from Naked City days, and he thought I could handle his job, and which I did. I handled all of television. That meant specials, that meant series, that meant movies, and so on. And after a while, I said, this is too much. You can't put one executive in charge of this whole thing. So we broke up the departments into specials and series and comedy and movies. Movie of the Week, 'cause that's when Movie of the Week business was still alive. Sadly, it's not anymore. So he said, what would you like to do? And I said, well, I loved the comedies. And I don't know that much about them, really, in terms of pitching. I know the drama is better. So I said, I like the comedies, and they're harder. So they made me vice president, and I was the first woman vice president of a major studio in the history of this town, in the development department. I think there were some vice presidents in charge of real estate and other departments, but in the development of television, I was the first. So they made a little shirt that said Veep on it, which was very cute. But I had a great office. It was all done in white wicker. And I had my own bathroom, which I thought was the pinnacle of success. And everybody used to come in and use the bathroom because it was such a pretty office. As I'm charging here. But it was really very pretty. I had little curtains and little things around. It was wonderful. But I had a good time at Fox. It was very worthwhile. And
How was it being a woman executive at that time?
Well, it was... again, I never asked for any special favors because of my gender. I always wanted the men to feel comfortable and to be just like, a person with them. And what was always kind of amazing to me is that when Dennis Stanfield, who was the CEO of Fox at the time, would have board meetings, and all of the guys would come in, and they'd all have to give their reports about, this division, how much money it made, and, the comedy division and the drama division and all that stuff. And it would go around the table. It was like a train, I'd see it coming closer to me, and the locomotive was upon me, and the track, I was lying on the track, and here it comes, and, and then they'd say, and then Nancy, how was your department? And I'd just say, we're great. we're just great. We're making a lot of movies. We're doing a lot of stuff. Next, and everybody would scream and go, "What?" They're giving long dissertations about their money and their development and how they're doing this and this. And I got away with murder, it's called, But I produced. I had a lot of good stuff on.
Did you feel there was any kind of like an old boy network?
The only thing that was wrong is that the guys made more money than me, and I was doing the same job. That was not cool. And there was nobody to complain to in those days. They didn't have a, where you can go to today, equal rights or all of that stuff. They didn't have that. So it used to kind of make me a little angry about the injustice of that.
Well, talk about some of the specific productions that you spearheaded at that time.
Well, I put together a comedy, a 1-hour comedy, which had never been done before. And I hired Joan Rivers, and I hired a writer named Hal Dresner, who was a very popular comedy writer. And I gave them a concept, and the concept, I think, could still work. It was, at the top of the hour, you present a problem. The first half hour, the girls take it over and try to figure it out. The second half hour, the guys try to figure it out. Now, that might mean that they go to the ball game to figure it out, and the girls can go shopping to figure it out, or whatever, And at the end of the hour, they get together. They were husbands, wives, and lovers, it was called. And they get together, and sometimes they'd agree, and sometimes they wouldn't. And it was all funny. It was all funny stuff. And everybody says, "You can't do an hour comedy, you can't." So I said, "Well, let's try." So I went into New York to pitch it to the big guys, Bud Grant and all the people. And I remember there was no chair for me in the room. And there was a big long table, like a conference table. Jeez, how could I think of it? How could I have done this? And I jumped up on the conference table. And I just sat there, swinging my legs back and forth like I was on a wall. And I said, "Well, what's your concept? What's your project?" And here's the story. This is what happens, blah, 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 blah. I looked around, and I'm seeing this guy going, "You're sitting on the table," It never occurred to me. Then I finished. They said, "Well, we'll have to think about this." I said, "Well, sure, I'm sure you will. It's a whole hour of primetime television. You can't stick 2 half hours in there. It's 1 hour." So I got back to New York and back to California, and everybody's we got the deal, we got this, we didn't get that. And I get a call from Cy. He said, "You won't believe this, they bought your show." I said, "Oh, that's good. Thank you, let's go." So it was great. Unfortunately, we got the orders so late to start that all the writers that we wanted were taken on other shows. So we were scrambling around like crazy to try to get writers, and we couldn't get enough shows banked, to really last. So we only were able to do, I think, 6 episodes of it, and then they just, tanked because we didn't have the staff. It was really a shame. And then I got 2 other pilots. I did a pilot called The Nurses, which was the flip side of MASH. Very funny. Brian Dennehy and Didi Khan. And then there was one other.
Was it the actual MASH? I mean, was it actually based on?
No, I said I want to do, here's MASH. Okay, now let's do the flip side of it. Let's do women in the Army, and there'll be nurses. But as a comedy, So, it was charming. And ABC, they didn't pick it up. And one other show I did. I remember what it was, but I got 2 pilots and a series on the air, which is pretty good for a short time. And then while I was doing that and my vice presidential duties, I was executive producing a movie at Fox called Sherlock Holmes in New York, with the wonderful Roger Moore as Sherlock and John Huston as Moriarty. And meeting John Huston, they said, "No, go and meet Mr. Huston. He's staying at the Beverly Hills Hotel." And I said, "Great, I want to welcome him." So I said, well, I'll meet for breakfast. So I called him, just said, I'm coming over, I'm going to be there at such and such a time. And they're fine. So I go over, and I'm in the Polo Lounge waiting for him. And in he comes. I said, my God, it's John Huston. I can't get over this. I'm in such shock. I love John Huston. He sits down, he's got the big cigar. Hello, Nancy. I said, hi, Mr. Huston. It's morning, and puffing the smoke, and I'm getting greener and greener and sicker. And I don't want to say anything because it's John Huston, Well, how you doing, little girl? I said, fine, Mr. Huston. Very well, thank you. I said, so this is going to be fun, isn't it? Yes, it's just going to be wonderful. I said, I'm going to die. I'm going to die at the table. I am going to pass out. I said, Mr. Huston, may I ask you a great favor? What is it? I said, do you think you could blow the smoke that way? Oh, it's just bothering you? I said, well, and it smelled. It was just awful. I said, well, it's a little hard before breakfast. And he said, well, okay. So I'll put it down. But it's sweet. I have a wonderful picture of him. He's great. So that was a terrific movie. Terrific.
How did it do?
Very well. Yeah, the world was in it. Charlotte Rampling played the love interest of Sherlock Holmes. David Huddleston. God, the world.
Now you were doing this separate from Fox? From your Fox
No, I was that was a Fox movie, but I was doing it with my right hand and my executive stuff with the left, and producing the pilots with the middle eye.
What was your role as a producer? What was your role? How did you work as a producer?
Well, as an executive producer on that picture, I had hired a producer, and that wasn't going too well. So they wanted me to be more hands-on, which Boris Segal was the director, who was a great friend of mine, a great director. And I put the cast together, along with the casting director, Joyce Selznick, whom I hired, and really negotiate a lot of those very difficult deals. Like Charlotte Rampling's deal was very hard to work out. But she was the perfect person for the part, so we had to have her. And a lot of the other stars. And then I was down the set to make sure the art directing was going accordingly right, and to the right, the right direction, and just kind of making sure that everybody was on time, on schedule, and nobody was carrying on, and everybody's behaving properly and doing their stuff. And millions of other things that producers do that you just can't say here's a list. The list is endless.
Did you find most of your time was spent on that film as opposed to?
I was running back and forth a lot. Yeah. But Jack Haley, who was the president of television, said to me, don't kill yourself. I want you supervising the film. So he said, well, whatever other stuff you have, we'll get assistance and helps and stuff like that, and they'll bring stuff to the set, for you to okay and stuff like that. So they were wonderful. So.
And how long did you remain in that position?
I think I was at Fox maybe 3 years, and then I left because I wanted to do an after-school special about a little girl that steals. And so Fox set me up in my own office and secretary and everything else, like an adjunct. So I moved away from the executive work into producing this other little movie that I wanted to do. So I had just about finished that when I got a call from CBS that said, "Can we spring you to produce a movie for us over here?" Which is, I think, something that you'd like to do. And that was Like Mom, Like Me.
Talk a little about that.
That was a very remarkable experience. Donald March, who was the executive at CBS, one of the best executives I'd ever had the pleasure of working with. So smart, so nice. He handed me a book and he said, "We have a script. It's no good. Here's the book that it's from, and here's the difficulty. The daughter," this is the mother wrote the book. "The daughter wrote the screenplay. Fix it." Oh, thanks, Donald. So I said, if I change stuff, either the daughter's going to be furious or the mother's going to be furious. So I said, it's like being put in the middle of horror. He said, well, if anybody can figure it out, you can. So I went to this lovely girl, Nancy Schwartz, who died much too young. And I said, look, we may have to change some aspects of your mother's book. And, you know, your mother's book is great and all that, but it's not dramatic. And what we need is some drama in certain sections. So if you'll just take a chance. So we really wrote it together. And though I didn't take writing credit. And once it was finished, I handed it into Donald, and Donald called me that night and said, it's a go, get it over to Kristen McNichol. I said, whoa, okay. So we got Kristen McNichol, and I asked Linda Lavin to play the mother, and she was brilliant. She was #1 show, Alice, and she did this. And Larry Pressman played the father, and I had a part in it. I said, I'm sneaking into this one. I think I had 3 lines or something. And it was the highest rated movie they had in a year.
What was the story?
It was a story of a woman who was a teacher, and her daughter, and her husband, who had fallen in love with, underage kind of girl, and had skipped town and gone away and what have you. And it was the mother-daughter story of how they had to find each other again due to the fact the father had left the picture, and how they survived, how they fought, how they tried to find any kind of reunion with themselves. And they went off to have a little vacation together, and the little girl finds a boy that she loves and she falls in love with. And it's the growing up story of the little girl and the growing up story of the mother. And then Larry Pressman comes back at the end, and instead of taking him back 1, 2, 3, she says, we've managed to come out of this sadness, and we're prepared not to go back into another relationship. Very tough story, but beautifully acted by those girls. I mean, and Larry Pressman could kill you. He's so beautiful. It was a terrific picture. Michael Pressman I hired to direct, and he had just done Bad News Bears, and he hadn't done television. But I liked him because of he's charming and sweet and very sympathetic, and he was wonderful. So we had a good show.
Now, you were really in demand for the made-for-television movies at that time.
Yeah, well, there weren't too many of us out there. You know, it wasn't. It was slim pickings to find, too many women to produce us.
Did they specifically want a woman producer?
No, but Donald knew that this would be a story that I would be able to really make happen in a really good way, and he was right.
And what do you think that is in you that you could do that?
The acting. You go into it. You go into a development. I did go into a development, playing all the parts, and if they don't ring true, they don't ring true. And I found it easier, than some of my colleagues to do that. It's not something that I just kind of sat down and said, "Oh, this is how I'm going to do development." No, it's almost osmosis. It's so much a fabric part of my life that it's not a conscious thing anymore. Anyway.
Do you think, in terms of television versus film, that there was something specifically for television that worked with you as well?
Well, it certainly was a media that I was most familiar with. And I knew the pitfalls of television. I know that, there's only so much time in television, that you have the luxury of film versus television in terms of hours and time and development. But with television, you know, there's a stopwatch going. And I think that's what appeals to me in a strange way.
It's the adrenaline that you talked about early on.
Yeah, it's the adrenaline and having to achieve it, having to win, having to make that work within the constraints. And I think that I find that challenge interesting.
And how did you transition then to directing?
I was working on a movie of the week for CBS as producer. And it was a very, very tough movie, very hard to get it right. And it was Patty Duke. And it was a story of his teacher who had been raped in a classroom. It was a very, very tough movie.
It's the violation of Sarah McDavid.
Yeah. And so Donald had me really work on it, and I didn't like the script. I just couldn't lick it, and the writers were not of the sort that really cared about having too much input. And in fact, I think they resented it quite strongly. And I knew things weren't going to work. I also had a friend who was a teacher who had a teacher who was raped in the classroom that was next door to her. So I had real authentic input from this friend. And no matter what I said to these writers, they just, resisted it, and it was just tough. So I said, oh, this is going to be hard. So I went to then give them a list of directors that I wanted. And they came back and said, we have a director under contract, and the thing is that we're going to have, he's actually done all the pictures under contract that he was supposed to, except for one, and we'd like to use him on this so we can finish the contract with him. Well, I had worked with him, and Stephanie Powers and I had worked with him, and we didn't care for him too much. We didn't find him too sympathetic. We didn't find him an actor's director at all. And I thought, I'm dealing with material with Patty about a rape and where she gets beaten up. I got to have somebody who's Lamont Johnson, or Buzz Kulik, or any of those wonderful guys. And no, I had to have this guy. They said, please, please, we'll make it up to you. Please take him. So with great reluctance and with great fear, I said, okay. So we started, and I knew it was not going to be good from the beginning because he would go into his office and shut the door, and he never would open the door. And he would make calls to the executives without including me, and I had notes to give him, which he wouldn't accept. And so I'd gone, and I'm that kind of person that goes around backs and complains. I take it, and I try to work with whatever is given to me. So it got to be almost to the time we were supposed to shoot. And I went to the executives, and I want to tell you, I said to them, look, I'm not responsible for what's going to happen. I don't think something as difficult as this show has the crew around it and the leader as a director around it that's going to make this a smooth sail. I'm just telling you. Oh, no, it'll be fine. Don't worry. You'll supervise it. I said, there is a point where you can't. I said, this is the point. I just want you to know. So, sure enough, one thing after the other happened, and Patty got an infected eye because she had to wear a prosthesis from having both a black eye, and she was this big thing. And he didn't work out the shots where she would only wear it a certain amount of hours. She had to wear it like a day, and I knew it was going to be bad. So she got an eye infection and had to shut down for a couple of days. Then I think a grip stand fell off the camera truck and broke something, and somebody was injured, and all this. It was just one thing. So I went to them. I said, "This is not my style. I run a ship that's beautifully run, and everybody has a good time, and everybody's happy." I said, "This is not happy. this isn't. So they said, we're so sorry. We're just, can just hang in there for a moment. I said, would you bring somebody else in to do the daily with him? Because it's just not going to work. So they brought in a friend of mine that I liked and I asked for, and he did the daily stuff with this guy. And I kept saying, if only I had a DGA card. If only I had a DGA card, I could have fired him and taken over, because I knew every shot in the book, that I would make. So when that was finished, CBS apologized up and down the street, and I said, remember this next time, that I really know what I'm doing. And I said, we know, but we had to get away. And I said, okay. I said, well, I'm not doing anything. I'm stopping. Should we stop?
Yes.
So, you ready? Okay. So what I did then was I said, I'm not working for a year. I'm not doing anything. I'm going to the American Film Institute. I'm getting it in the women's directing program. And I'm going to go on that other side. Which I did. But what was funny with AFI at that time, as opposed to this time, where they teach you, they don't teach you then. They gave you $1,200 and said, go make a picture and let us know at the end of the day how you did. Oh, my God, Well, luckily I found a guy named Bob Richardson, who was studying at AFI, who's now got more Oscars than this room could hold. And he was so handsome. He had white hair. He was 20-something years of age. And I said, come on, we're going to make this thing. And we went and we made it, and it was a great success. And that was my calling card for the beginning of my next career.
What did you make?
I made a piece that I don't have the rights to. And I can't say because I'll get sued. But I wasn't going to broadcast it, but I wanted it because I loved the story so much. And it really worked out. Bruce Davidson was in it, and it was just really great. Worked out well, thanks to Bob. And I have a big passion for my cameramen who have saved more directors' asses and than anything else. But Bob was great, and the picture turned out great, and I started walking around town with my tape.
Well, you've had so much other experience. Did that play into it at all, or was it really, they were really just looking at your directorial abilities, or did everything else play into it?
Well, no, because, I was going after jobs like for Dynasty. So it had to be of some substantial, talent to show that I could handle it,
So you didn't want to produce anymore? Or did you?
Yeah, I certainly can produce and direct at the same time, and have. But I was concentrating on this. This was the next step.
Let's stop here to change the tape.